So next up will be Paul Ardeleanu. And I'm actually not sure. I wanted to ask Paul how to pronounce his name, who's the Senior Developer Relations Manager at Vonage. How do I pronounce your name properly?
It depends what you're trying to. It depends on the audience. So I'm going to do a DevRel thing. It just so originally it's a Romanian name, so it's pronounced Ardeleanu. So it's a Latin language, but most people can't pronounce it. So usually I live in UK, so I pronounce it Ardeleanu because people pick it up and eventually can learn to spell it as well. So, but it's always a challenge. So, but yeah, I usually go by Paul. So that's.
Thanks for that clarification.
No problem.
So your talk is going to be about what developers want, and
So I've been a developer for 20 years now, and about 3 years ago I moved proper into developer relations, and that's kind of when I saw the other side of the story. And this talk is effectively the lessons I've learned in those 3 years.
Okay, very, very cool. I'll give the floor to you.
Sure.
And then we can chat up a little bit after your presentation.
Sounds good. Thank you, Christoph. Cool. I'm going to go into full screen, so please let me know if you can't see my slides proper. Okay, so I'll just assume that everything works. Cool. So thank you, everyone. Welcome to my talk. As Christoph said, my name is Paul Ardeleanu. I work in developer relations team at Vonage, where I lead the tooling team. And I would like to spend like the next 20 minutes or so sharing with you the learnings that I've accumulated over the last 3 years while working with developers that actually use our products. And then I'll leave you at the end with some practical takeaways to kind of enhance your life if you work in that sector. So for those of you that might not encounter Vonage before, we are a cloud communication company that provides messaging, voice, and video APIs for developers to integrate into their apps. And you can find more information about us at developer.vonage.com. And you might have actually heard about us under the previous name, Nexmo. We've been part of the Apidays community for a while, and some of my colleagues spoke last year, the year before. Also, you might have heard of us from the press recently due to us being acquired by Ericsson. And with that out of the way, let's turn to the topic at hand. So what do developers want? Given the audience of this event, I'll just assume that you are in the API business, where API is either your product or something that enables your product. So what do developers want from, developers that want to use your product? What do they want from you? Well, in any given day, they would want APIs, right? And then documentation. And on top of that, code snippets and tutorials and libraries and open API specs and familiar standards and SDKs and code snippets. And you see where it's going: sample code, debugging tools, integrations, dashboards, free trials, multi-language documentation as you expand your territories, and then multi-language SDKs, as in different programming languages. The truth of the matter is developers want every single thing, and they want everything yesterday. And I have a perfect example to illustrate this. This week, actually, a user of our PHP SDK asked us to support some new features introduced in PHP 8.1. The problem with that is PHP 8.1 was released less than 2 weeks ago. So this is the crux of the issue with businesses that try to adopt DevRel practices and start a department and ultimately fail. They tend to give in kind of the loudest part of the demands, and without actually putting in place a systematic methods to take into account what's the most impactful thing for their business. And the web is full of horror stories of whole DevRel departments being disbanded overnight. And I think there's a story about 6 years ago about PayPal closing down their DevRel department for various reasons. You see, when we keep asking ourselves, what do developers want from us as a business, I believe we're asking the wrong question. We should start from the desired outcome and kind of work our way towards the required actions. And I've just realized I didn't put my light on, so it's a bit dark, but hopefully you'll see me okay. I think what we should be asking instead is, what do businesses want? What do we want to engage? Why do we want to engage developers and kind of spend all this time and resources on them? So let's categorize this kind of requirements that the business will want. And broadly speaking, I put them into 5 different categories, prioritized by how critical they are. So the first one is survival, right? The business must stay in business. At the minimum, you need to kind of have that cash flow and have that ability to be able to survive. In some cases, this doesn't include profitability necessarily, and this is more kind of prevalent in kind of the new startups and the new ecosystem. But generally, profitability comes in the second part, where you have development stage that you grow, you try to attract talent, you become something more established. And then you build relationships, obviously, to be able to thrive, and eventually get to build a brand that have that recognition in the industry. And at the end of it all, we all want a higher purpose, a why. We get to cast a shadow, on this rock in the middle of vast nothingness, if you like. It turns out that this actually is a pretty known pattern of needs, and everyone probably will be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is a slightly simplified version. And all the kind of the previous ones map very well on this hierarchy, and each one builds on top of the previous one. One important note here is businesses can actually jump between these needs at different stages depending where they are, and also in cases of big businesses, different departments can be at different stages, right? At different times. The whole business doesn't have to be at the same stage. So we'll come to back to this in a bit and kind of circle back. But let's now focus our attention in kind of what current models we deploy in developer relations. So the two most popular ones are ARP and the Orbit model. And those working in developer relations probably heard about these. And these are the two that I've been using more or less for the last couple of years. So ARP stands for, it's an acronym. Stands for awareness, acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue, products. It's a lot of words there, and it's probably easily recognizable by you. This has been developed by a friend and a former manager of mine, Phil Legater, and you can find an introduction at that URL on the screen. It is very similar to a traditional purchase funnel, right? So at its core, it's a consumer-focused marketing-like model that relies heavily on conversion, right, to drive decisions. This is why a lot of businesses like it, right? It's probably one of the best models to employ in DevRel. The second one is Orbit, which is an open source model that replaces conversion with connection. It is very interaction-centric model, and to put it simplistically, it tracks popularity. And it splits your audience into 4 areas called orbits. So around your team, you'll have the first layer will be ambassadors, then fans, then users, and then observers. And every single user is tracked and he gets a score. And that score is based on the audience size and kind of the love they spread, which is kind of a rough representation of a sentiment their message projects. This model is a bit more kind of kumbaya, if you like, and it tries to associate some value to the social networks. Now, both models kind of give you good insights into where your developer relations program is at a certain moment in time. But as we all know, you only get good results if you put good data in, which brings us to the hardest problem in developer relations, which is metrics. It should be no surprise that the data trends are essential to the decision-making. However, it's very easy to say, okay, well, we're doing a great job because last quarter we gave away 10,000 T-shirts with our logo on it. You need to track the correct metrics, right? So you need to track things that matter. So, okay, we'll say, okay, we reached, in the last month, we reached 100,000 developers. But have you really, did you actually get to interact one-to-one with every single attendee at every single event that you spoke at or sponsored? And this is where the next adjustment comes in. You need to track business metrics, right? Things that matter to the business, things that matter to the bottom line. And also, you need to track the currently correct business metrics. It depends where you are on that hierarchy on what things you need to track. So a startup probably should not spend time building brand or having a very public mission statement until it nails the basics. And we've seen this kind of mistake over and over again with a lot of startups that raise a lot of money and create this kind of vision of a world and then fail to deliver the basics. And it's nothing worse than you not being able to match your talk with your walk sort of thing, and kind of leave developers disappointed in your products. So let's have a look at kind of what sort of metrics we usually track. So in most cases, in developer relations, we track very easy metrics to track. So we start with web analytics, readership, followers, attendees, t-shirts, or if you have to please management, white papers. I call all of these vanity metrics. And yes, they are good to have, but they tell you very little at what happens actually inside the business. And probably the only thing you should pay attention with these metrics is the trend. You probably want more organic traffic, for example, and you probably want to be in front of more people at events. And as long as the trend is in the right direction, should be fine. I wouldn't worry necessarily about the numbers. Also, notice that most of these actions are push actions. You go and do something rather than people asking you for things. So what do these numbers actually mean? Okay, let's move to the other side. What does the business actually track? Broadly speaking, there are a couple of different categories: financial, revenue, profits, return on investment, internal and external metrics, anything from culture to monthly active users. And at the top, once you kind of cover the basics, you have esteem-related things like branding, social good projects involved into local policies and so on. And you can start see a sort of disconnect between one or the other. So here's a crazy idea. How about if we use the same metrics or very similar metrics to track how we, to maybe have the same related business, to make that interaction between DevRel and business much easier. And actually, when they ask for things, you can speak that language. So in this process, you can come up with kind of a couple of business-driven developer initiatives to make the tracking easier. So going back to the hierarchy of needs, at a very minimum, you need APIs and docs, right? So that's the initiative that you want. The associated metric is coverage. How much of your product is actually covered by the APIs, if that's your business model, how much of those APIs covered by the docs. And when I talk about docs, I include things like open API specs, snippets, tutorials, sample apps, all that kind of goodness that a developer will need to have at a minimum to try your product. On top of that, you want kind of high-level things like SDKs, libraries, no-low code. This is kind of trendy these days. Anything from having a Node SDK to having a library that supports the latest, shiniest thing in, say, Swift. And the metric for that is usage, right? And this is kind of will inform your decision into how much resources you also spend on an ongoing basis. And there's a reason why I pick usage there, because usage is actually revenue. If you take the free trial aside, every single time people use your products, you should charge for them. And that's kind of a business-related metric that you need to have. And from there onwards, you can start, once you have a basis right, you can start doing public-facing initiatives, create partnerships and meaningful interactions with people. And as you build the brand, you probably want to contribute back to the community and say open source. You can open source your products or release libraries you extract from your products to solve certain needs. Ambassador programs is another good example of this case. And you can use that to both, do good in the community, to help people kind of get up to speed. But you need to have a brand in order to do that, to attract the right people in there. And the metric for that is brand recognition. And if you worry about how to track brand recognition, don't. Your marketing department probably already does that. So that's where you need to start speaking about. Right. So here are the key points that I want you to take from this talk. Measure everything. Every single decision must be backed by data, period. No touchy-feeling choices, no things because they feel right. You need to understand how they impact your business. Make sure you prioritize the right things. For example, if you have both SDK, if you track both SDK installs and API calls, maybe you should think of what the usage means. So install numbers, for example, can be skewed massively by a lot of various continuous integration systems or the likes. But the actual API calls most likely have a direct correlation to the bottom line. So define the usage the right way. Prefer push to pull. Something we touched briefly earlier. A subscriber to your newsletter is probably more valuable than a visitor on your website. They want to consume your content. That's why they're subscribed in the first place. So, and also you need to be careful how you define a subscriber, right? Someone that follows you on social media is probably not a subscriber. But there are other ways to mitigate that. And if you look into GitHub, for example, when you have stars and other things, you need to understand how those kind of how you define those followers. And again, it depends very much on the business. It depends on exactly what you sell at the end of the day. But you need to define which relationship is actually better than another and is meaningful to you. You need to familiarize yourself with the business lingo. And I'm saying this as a developer that spent 20 years in the industry. You need to understand the whole picture when you build something. You get to know your marketing and sales colleagues, find ways to help them, and you're off to the races, and you'll reap the benefits as well. And developer relations is closely aligned to a lot of other departments. So if you get to kind of make your marketing colleagues and your sales colleagues, your friends and your peers, they will help you do your job as well. Bring back your findings. So I always say that developer relations is a kind of a foreign department for a business. You get to speak with your customers, bring back that feedback to the engineers. You get to scan badges at events, pass them on to the salespeople. A co-founder asked you for guidance. Make sure they also have a call with the startup team, and the startup team can help them with free credits and a lot of this other stuff to make their business grow. Experiment, learn, rinse, repeat. Probably no surprise there. You should try different things, see how they work, learn from them. Extend this also to how your teams are formed, and see what different scenarios work for your business. And ultimately, developer relations is both an external and an internal exercise. It is most likely the department that kind of needs to work well with all the others and kind of touches every single other thing. And kind of these are my learnings. You need to kind of, it's a I think it's a fair perspective on kind of what DevRel is, and this is how my perspective on DevRel changed substantially over the last 3 years, kind of from very kumbaya, very let's go to events and speak, and to a more methodical kind of enterprise. And I'm going to leave you with this. DevRel is a very fun and rewarding activity. You get to be the customer zero. You get to try things, but also it can be frustrating because you get to try broken things. But ultimately, it's very rewarding, and I absolutely love that little video. So this is my talk. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you find this useful. If you'd like to try some of our products, I have a voucher code for you. You can use it at developer.vonage.com. If you'd like to come and join me and the rest of the tooling team to build the next generation of tools, we have a few roles open. You can get them you can see them at vonage.dev/join. And if you have any other questions, here's my email address and my Twitter URL, and I'll be sharing the slides in a tweet today, probably at some point. So thank you very much for your time. Hope this was useful.
Thank you very much for your
bang on time.
Oh, you did really great. So
it's like I do this for a job. It's like I do this for a job.
A lot of information really quickly, and really well done. It's a fascinating idea to think about metrics. I know how, like I've done I've done the circuits on the DevRel community and events, so I know how hard and how difficult topic metrics are. It's a fascinating idea to think about it from an evolving perspective, that you also need to contextualize your metrics to the needs of the business. So that was super useful and very, very insightful. How has it evolved? Or I don't know, maybe it's too early, but how do you see things evolving now with the APIscene acquisition? Do you think that is going to change again?
DevRel is the only constant in DevRel is change, basically. So you always look for new things. I think with the APIscene acquisition, it's very early day to say, and probably shouldn't talk about this publicly, but it's still early days. It's going to be finalized. What's interesting for us is how we evolved over the last 3 years, because Vonage is actually an amalgam of companies that got acquired. right?
Yeah.
So, for example, Vonage, back in the day in States, we're talking 20 years ago, it was a VoIP company. So they would send you a box and you do long distance calls, right? And then they acquired a company called Nexmo, which is, where I worked, that did all the APIs. And then the Nexmo on its own acquired a company called Talkbox, which does the video. And funny enough, it actually powers Hopin. So the video we're doing here is powered by us. But all that is a really good challenge, because you have all these different brandings that you need to bring in house, and then you do different kind of activities in different communities, right? So and different tools have different needs, and you have communities that are more skeptical of being sold on. I always say that developers have a very finely tuned BS meter, right? So they don't like to be marketed on. So you need to be careful and evolve. But going back to the Ericsson acquisition, I'm excited. For me, is I back in the day I did a lot of hardware related kind of machine interfacing thing, and Ericsson does a lot of hardware. We do a lot of API and software. So I see that marriage of hardware and software at the network level working really, really well. And I'm excited about IoT and a lot of other things we can go in.
Super interesting challenges ahead, I think.
Yeah. I think it will be interesting couple of years for us, and it will be amazing to get the support of a huge company like Ericsson.
Yeah, so I had to laugh when you put up the Maslow's the pyramid, because one of the conversations I've had with Mark in the last couple of weeks that we've been having chats together is that the Maslow didn't actually make the pyramid; that somebody else made the pyramid.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So he's when I saw that, I was joking, and we were laughing.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. I need to do some research about that. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's always the case. It always happens.
It's a super useful. Well, it helps to organize this contextualization, and that's why I think. As humans, we always look for models to help us to deal with reality, and
sometimes it's easier to explain things. The picture says 1,000 words, sort of thing. And I think with DevRel is because it's a fairly new discipline. A lot of people go into it with expectations of a kind of different kind. They don't understand that there is a business reason why DevRel exists in the first place, and at the end of it, year you need to justify existence.
Yes.
And if myself, for example, if I asked for a couple more people in the team to do X, I need to justify it from a business perspective. And this is kind of where a lot of people think, oh, at DevRel, I mean, they go to events, they travel the world on companies' money, and they just get to speak in front of people, and it's fun. And so it's always good to see that other perspective and understand where you are and kind of what's the best and most impactful way for you as an individual to kind of help the team and help the business at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think it'll be interesting to see how everything evolves, especially since there's this expanding surface now of the much larger organization, and how that maybe there's some really exciting stuff that can be done with like developer portals for hardware even.
Oh yeah, definitely. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. What I was about to say is DevRel also is going through a kind of specialization stage at the moment. So previously it was just developer relations or developer advocate or developer evangelist, whatever you want to call them. And now you see more specialized things. Like in my team, for example, we have people that are very close to engineers rather than developer relations, because they build tooling. They get to speak at events, but their main objective is kind of building things. So you have a tooling specialist, then you have a technical writer, right? That kind of writes things from a perspective of someone that is technical and kind of has a technical background. And then you have kind of outreach people that are mostly, forward facing, go to events and speak to people. So I think different people will have to kind of start specializing a bit, how, the IT industry went through the stage of back end, front end, 20, 30 years ago. So it's kind of the same thing that's happening at the moment.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Paul. It was super
useful for having
talk. Me. Yeah, and I'll be following with excitement how things go, and maybe I'll come around. It's going to be interesting to see the swag you'll have in the future.
Yeah, well, we're still gonna have a brand, so it's gonna be the same thing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Christoph.
Thank you.
Good luck with everything. Thank you.
Yeah.